Greek mythology is full of monsters. Obviously, there's like a million stories, and every good story has to have a villain of some sort, and they really like just really weird-looking creatures that are going to kill you. It's weird. For example, we got Scylla, who was cursed by Circe and turned into like an evil sea serpent that stopped Odysseus on his journey. We've got the Minotaur, who was locked away and isolated because Zeus sucks, and because his dad was an ass. And, of course, we have Medusa, who I know quite a bit about. I wonder why! And the reason I say that, if you're not familiar already, is because I am writing a book. This book is called Heart and Stone, and it is about Medusa. And while writing my book, I realized something. A lot of these, like, monsters that we know in Greek mythology weren't, like, actually inherently evil. It was kind of just because of the hero and, like, how they perceived them. But, like, a lot of these monsters, specifically the ones I just named, were all ones that were literally just punished for something they couldn't control, which I just thought was kind of messed up. So today I want to talk about what Greek myths get wrong about monsters and why I think it matters when it comes to the perspective on my book, Heart and Stone. I touched on this a lot in my last video, the whole like concept of like what is a monster and like perspective and how that influences monsters and stories. So I recommend you check out that video, but I'm probably going to be repeating myself a lot because I already forget what I said in my last video. So there's that. Growing up in stories, monsters are like always the bad guys. It's kind of, like when you hear the word monster, you think of evil and bad. Like that's the connotation. Which is, like, fair enough, I guess. Like, yeah. But, I mean...
I'm not thinking about it. I think there was a kid's book that was, like, the friendly monster. Or something. Does that exist? Am I making that up? I don't know. Okay.
And so, like, heroes are good, and monsters are bad, and they're there so that the hero can kill them. Or, okay, maybe not kill, that's a bit violent. But, like, defeat them. They're... win. So the hero can win, and the monster can fail. And the hero can get whatever they want, and the monster can... go away. Sometimes to death. In most stories, we're never really told why monsters are monsters. Or I feel like I'm growing up as a kid, as most people grow up as. I just remember, like, I never had a lot of perspective on monsters in stories, or just villains in general in stories, because they weren't, like, fleshed out. Like, a book is rarely from the monster's perspective, it's from the hero. And because of this, they have this, like, inner bias against it. I think that's interesting, is that when you, like, really take a step back and look at it, especially with, like, Greek myths that date back to literal ancient times, and, like, we're still kind of doing the same thing with stories, where it's, like, I don't want to say black and white, but it's kind of, like, the monster and the hero. And, like, what happened to the monster doesn't matter because we're rooting for the hero. You know, that's kind of how I view it, like, to this day. When I read Greek myths, retellings have obviously done a good job as, like, fleshing out both sides, and I've read plenty of books where the monster is, like, a fleshed out character, but I do remember thinking it a lot as a kid, and it probably is more clear in kids' books now that I, think about it. So yeah, in most books, we're just told, like, this is the villain, and we don't like them, and they need to be defeated, and they're not, like, full fleshed out characters with their own lives and hopes and wants and desires. They just, have to die. Sorry, I'm really on a violent streak. It's like 9 p.m. right now. I'm really tired. And again, this, like, isn't true for all books. I've read a lot of books, and, like, some do a really great job of, like, showing the monster's perspective. Or, like, it is the monster's perspective, and, like, who we thought is the hero is actually the villain. But typically, it can be assumed that the villain isn't going to be as fleshed out as the main character, unless the villain is the main character. And I think that's really true of Greek myths. Alright, so the first, like, monster in Greek mythology that I kind of want to touch upon...
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
...is the Minotaur. And... first off, I would like to reflect back on an earlier statement I made in my intro where I said Zeus. I meant Poseidon. I don't know why I said Zeus. It was Poseidon. And I'm going to correct that in the editing really badly, probably. So, yeah, sorry. But I do know it's Poseidon. The Minotaur is the son of Minos' wife and a bull. Because obviously. So the Minotaur is half bull and half man. Because obviously. And like this happened because King Minos, or Minos, or whatever. I think it's Minos. I'm gonna go with Minos. If I'm wrong, cope. I'm pretty sure it's Minos. Is it Minos? Alright, so pretty much like King Minos of Crete, question mark, prayed to Poseidon and was like, hey bro, can you like let me run this place if I like sacrifice an animal? And Poseidon was like, sure dog, but make sure you sacrifice that animal. And Minos just didn't. Like he just didn't. He sacrificed a different animal or something. Because he's stupid. And so Poseidon was like, hey, I didn't appreciate that. Your wife is gonna go have sex with a bull. Because obviously. And so with the help of Daedalus, who is most commonly known for the myth of Icarus, which will definitely be touched upon at some point in this channel. I love that myth! He builds the labyrinth, which is a term I think we're all familiar with. And that is where the Minotaur is kept and locked away and like forced to live in there in isolation because he's obviously the problem. And so King Minos demanded a tribute from the Athenians, I think, and every 9 years they had like 6 or 7 sons and daughters come and be devoured by the Minotaur. Which again, is the Minotaur's fault. Obviously! And then later on, the Minotaur is killed and blah 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 blah. Monster, ew, evil, Percy Jackson! He killed Sally Jackson, guys, he must be evil! That was a joke. But anyway, so the Minotaur is like literally born into this prison, and he can't get out, and he just like has to kill people, because he's like, he's kinda angry. And but like he didn't choose this life, and he was like being used by like an awful king. Most of the kings were awful, but Minos sucked. And like then the Minotaur was like blamed for existing. And I just think that's like I feel like the Minotaur is a very well-known monster, but like why was he a monster? He was just a guy who was also a bull. Because his mom was forced to fall in love with a bull because Poseidon is a petty bitch. That ain't his fault. Alright, this next one is actually one of my favorites because I feel like a lot of people don't like fully know this story. And that is Scylla. So Scylla is first introduced as if this is like a movie or something. She's first mentioned in the Odyssey by Homer, where she is encountered by Odysseus and his crew and like kills a bunch of them, yada 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 yada. Sounds like everyone else on Odysseus' journey. They were all trying to kill him constantly. But a lot of people don't actually know her origin. And I think it's, like, interesting. I had first heard about it in... there's a book called Circe by Madeline Miller. It's a wonderful book. I absolutely love... The author is amazing. The book is amazing. Incredible. I will probably do a review on that book at some point because I love that book. But it touches very, like, a little tiny bit on Scylla. And, like, you have to be cautious with retellings, obviously. Like, as someone who is also writing a retelling, we do take some creative liberties. And so I did, like, actually research the myth. But pretty much how it goes is that Circe, also from the Odyssey, and Scylla, like, were in the same area. And there was this guy named Glaucus. That sounds right. Glaucus. And, like, Circe, she was kind of into him, you know? But so was Scylla. And Glaucus was into Scylla. And Circe was jealous. And so she, turned her into a monster. As people do. Obviously. And so, like, because Circe is jealous and can't cope with the fact that, like, her crush liked somebody else, she turns Scylla into a monster. She, like, poisons her bathwater or something crazy. Like, overreaction. Calm down. And so, like, Scylla, like, completely loses her old life. She has, like, 6 heads now. I'd be pissed too. It's like now Scylla is like this evil monster that everyone fears, but like it wasn't her fault. She was punished and blamed because Circe was mad. And like, I'm not a Circe hater. I love Circe. Okay, she's great, kind of. Depends on the myth and the version. But Circe's, like, not that bad compared to other people in Greek mythology. Yeah, again, so Circe is, like, a whole other matter. Like, she's, like, not completely a villain, but she's also, like, not innocent. You know, in many different myths that she's involved in. Why is there a pig? And, of course, last and not least, Medusa! Probably, like, one of the most famous, well-known, like, Greek mythology monsters, and she's definitely my favorite, because I wrote a whole book based around her, so I hope she would be. Okay, so Medusa's myth gets a little more complicated because of the two different versions. And again, in a future video, I plan to, like, really deep dive on this, but there's the Roman variant and there's the Greek variant of the myth. And in the Greek variant, she was born a Gorgon, and in the Roman variant, she wasn't. And I am going to use the Greek god names just because it's easier. So in the Roman version, which it was written by Ovid, I believe, Medusa was not, she was born human, and then she was taken advantage of by Neptune, Poseidon, in Athena, Minerva, in her temple, and, you know, Athena wasn't happy about it. And so Athena then, like, Athena responded by turning Medusa into the snake-headed eye stone thing lady. And then that gets complicated because, like, it was first as a punishment, you know, like, to punish her for what happened to her. But then, like, later reflections were like, no, she was trying to protect her because now she can't be taken advantage of anymore. So, like, that myth gets really complicated because that's one that's been, like, retold and modernized a lot. But I think just no matter what version, like, it still is partly true that, like, Medusa is punished and villainized for something she can't control. Like, whether she was born a Gorgon or she got turned into a Gorgon, like, she still did not choose to not be able to look people in the eye without, like, turning them to stone. And I think that would drive literally anyone insane. Like, come on, that's crazy. And so, like, she's punished and isolated and, like, sent to this island with her sisters, and, like, she's only remembered as something, like, scary, like, as, like, a murderer. And, like, yeah. Maybe she turned some people into stone. God forbid a girl needs garden decorations. Stop being so judgy. But, like, anyway, so, like, she's, like, reflected on as a monster, and she was not. She was a person. Or a Gorgon. Either way, she didn't deserve that. Obviously. And so I guess my main point here is that, like, a lot of monsters were literally just people who were being hurt and who were punished by someone else's actions or someone else's feelings, and, like, then they were blamed for surviving the way they had to, or surviving the way they adapted to, or, like, being angry at the world. And there's, like, so many more examples of this. These were just three that, like, really stood out to me because they're myths I really like. And so I think the main question here is, like, why does this happen so much? And I think it's because that labeling someone as a monster is really easy. Like, I'm gonna try to stop something. Using that label takes away the responsibility, and it removes the empathy from the situation, because if someone is a monster, they're evil. And so there's no reason to feel bad for them. So instead of seeing their whole story, or their reasons, or what happened to them, it's easier to just be like, no, they're evil. They're evil, and they deserve it. Even when that's, like, not the case or right. And, like, empathy is important. Because, like, once someone is perceived as a monster, it, like, protects the hero and their image. And it, like, simplifies the story a little bit. And, like, it makes the hero look better. Like, that, I feel like it kind of is as simple as that. It just, like, if there's little to no sympathy for the villain, or there's not as much backstory, or people, like, don't go into it, like, being like, man, I don't like this character, but I wonder why they are that way, which I feel like, some people don't look at stories that way. Some people do. Again, this is not, like, a widespread thing. It's just something I've noticed with Greek mythology, and specifically. And since I'm writing a book about Greek mythology, I just thought it was an interesting topic to talk about. But yeah, I just think it's interesting how much myths do this. I don't really have much to say on this specific section. So I think all of this really influenced the way I went into planning my book. Because when I got the idea for the book, I, like, wasn't completely sure how I was gonna do it specifically, like which angle I was gonna tackle it from. Like, I had the idea of Medusa being the mother of a blind child. Like, I had that concept, and then I, like, kind of had to go back in and really, like, think of how we, as the reader, are supposed to view Medusa. And so, like, really thinking about myths in the way that we, as the reader, are presented villains, that really affected the way I write, because in Heart and Stone, the villain of the story is the hero in the original perspective. So, like, I didn't want to write about, like, a heartless monster who, like, has absolutely no backstory or reasoning for her cruelty or whatever. Like, I wanted to write about a person. Like, Medusa, she's just Medusa in this story. She's not, like, a monster. She's got snakes, and she turns people to stone, and she's perceived as a monster by a lot of people, but she isn't a monster. Like, she's just Medusa. And she certainly isn't a monster to Amaro, the blind child. And is my hair weird?
Yeah.
And I really think, like, an interesting thing to play with when writing my book was, like, how that perception of being a monster affected her. Like, we really get to see how other people's actions and other people's attitudes to her affected her, because, like, she wasn't a villain, technically. Kind of. So, like, for her to be able to be perceived as, like, this little boy's whole world and his hero, it kind of, like, changes the way she thinks about herself and the way she feels about herself. And I think that was, like, important, because, like, she thought she was so unlovable because that's what everyone kept telling her. But then she finds someone who loves her, and she finds out that she is capable of love, even after all this time and all the harm that she has caused because of the actions of others and what that forced her to become. And, like, she can still protect, and she can still care, and she can still love, and, like, that's beautiful. And that's, like, the core of my book right there. Like, that, even though in the original myth she is a villain, it's, like, expanded upon that to show that she is capable of love and emotion and being good, even if, Perseus didn't see her that way. And so, like, I really hope people will question stories when they're reading a book, and, like, will question the perspective and who the villain really is, and not just, like, take the narrator side. Because I, personally, when I'm reading a book, I love an unreliable narrator. Like, I love, like, when you realize halfway through that, like, the person narrating might not have the best perspective on the book. And I think that actually kind of makes the best villains. That's not really what happens in my book, to be honest, but I think that makes a great villain. And I think that's, like, an important, like, literacy skill, is to be able to, like, look deeper in on the villain and not just think, like, they're an evil monster. Like, just because somebody is called a monster doesn't actually mean they're evil. Like, that disconnect between those words. And, like, I don't think that's just true in myths. I think that's true in real life. Like, just because somebody is called a monster doesn't actually mean they are one. And it's important to, think about who they are and what they might have gone through in their perspective and, all that stuff. And so I think, like, the main questions that readers should ask is, like, who are we calling the monster? Who benefits from that title being used, and who gets silenced from that title? And because, like, stories shape how we see people, and we need to be careful with that and that perception. So if you like mythology, writing, and I almost flipped you off, and rethinking old stories, I'm making more videos like this. This one, I didn't even plan to do. I have a schedule planned out for the entire year, and there was only supposed to be one video in January. And if all goes according to plan, and this will be posted probably January 31st, maybe February 1st if I get lazy. But, like, I wasn't planning to make another video this month, and then I did. So the next video will be on February 15th. That one is planned, and that is the one I expected to do. But I, like, had this idea, and I kind of wanted to just come on here and talk about it. Because that's what having a YouTube channel is, just coming on here and talking about things. And editing is really fun, so I wanted to do that. What was I saying? Anyway, I'm making more videos like this and talking about Greek mythology as a whole, my book, being a writer, being a teenager and a writer, like a lot of things. And so feel free to subscribe if you want to stick around, and thank you for listening. Bye bye!